In the recent past, several regional blocs in different parts of the world have been formed mainly to promote economic cooperation. The few well-known examples of regional blocs are EU, European Union, NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, and SAARC, South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. The regional economic cooperation has been witnessed in both the developed as well as developing countries, though attempts at cooperation among developed nations have been far more successful than among developing countries. Now, in most instances, a number of reasons prompt the countries in a certain region to get together and form an economic bloc. On the other hand, there have also been examples of inter-sub-regional and extra-regional cooperation. Broadly speaking, there can be 5 kinds of cooperation. Number 1, free trade area. In free trade area, the tariffs among member states are abolished. However, each member maintains its own external tariffs for the non-free trade area countries. Number 2, custom union. In addition to the abolishment of all internal tariffs among member states, as in the free trade area, in the custom union, an agreement is also reached on tariffs for non-member states. Number 3, common markets. Common market has all the characteristics of a custom union. It goes a step further and abolishes the restrictions on factor mobility, that is, flow of labor, capital, etc. Number 4, economic union. An economic union has all the features of the common market. Additionally, it attempts some degree of harmonization of national economic policies. European Union is the best example of economic union. Number 5, complete economic integration. The last stage in the evolution of economic cooperation or integration is what can be known as the complete economic integration. It presupposes the unification of monetary, fiscal, social, and other policies. It requires the setting up of a supranational authority whose decisions are binding for the member states. The European Union is heading in this direction, as you might be aware. There are some benefits which can be counted in support of regional economic cooperation. It results in the elimination of barriers to flows of trade and resources. The resources can then flow to more efficient producers. Regional economic cooperation thereby provides a fillip to growth of markets. The business firms in this manner can achieve economies of scale in production, resulting in an overall efficiency which increases due to competition. With a view to mutually benefit from the concept of regional economic cooperation, a development that has been witnessed all over the world, an idea was mooted some time ago by some countries situated on the Indian Ocean rim to foster greater economic cooperation. India was one of such countries. Let us first see what is the importance of Indian Ocean and what is the rationale behind regional cooperation among countries of the Indian Ocean rim.
The Indian Ocean indeed is one of the most important oceans of the world. Although it is the 3rd largest, it has become, over the centuries it has been, and even now it is the lifeline of international trade and commerce. It connects the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific and commands major choke points in this area. It carries half of world's container traffic, 1/3 of its bulk cargo, and 2/3 of its oil. Apart from that, over the centuries, there has been a webbing together of littoral communities around the Indian Ocean ports, and commerce and trade have thrived over the centuries. So that provides a kind of eco-strategic backdrop to the Indian Ocean rim association initiative which India is now engaged in. The other rationale for why the littoral states of the Indian Ocean Rim must get together is that we now have very important developments that have taken place in the post-Cold War world, which has made it possible for us to get together amongst ourselves. Before that, colonialism had separated us from each other. We had developed very robust linkages with our former colonial partners and masters, but now it is time that we look at each other free from colonial linkages and undisturbed by them, and also undisturbed by the Cold War polarizations. So in the 1990s, a number of developments have made it possible for the Indian Ocean Rim to come into being, come into its own as a community of nation states, and as an economic cooperation grouping. The related issue of complementarities, why should these countries get together, is that this region is very rich in strategic and precious minerals and metals. It has something like 70 to 90% of the world's diamonds, uranium, aluminium, you name it. It's very rich in raw materials. It has very, very large concentration of arable land. So it is really a bread basket. It can be a bread basket of the world. And there are other complementarities in terms of human resource endowments, in terms of capital now, because many countries are capital rich and can and are investing in other countries. So the rationale is very much there for economic cooperation. The intra-trade among these countries already is about 20%, and so we can build on that. There is considerable scope for building on that.
So the first rationale is based upon the historical fact that the Indian Ocean and the waters thereof have been the binding force for the countries that fall on the shores. The second rationale to me appears to be of a more recent origin. In the 60s and the 70s, the Indian Ocean was the place which was considered to be a zone of peace, and Indian Ocean countries, after independence of the countries which belong to this region, should really come together. In fact, this vision was perceived and also given some practical shape by our first Prime Minister, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the Afro-Asian Solidarity in the conference that took place immediately around the 40s and the 50s. A number of initiatives were taken to bring together the countries of the Asian region and the African region. The third rationale that comes to my mind is the emergence of various economic groupings that have taken place in the recent past. You find that strong economic groupings have emerged in Europe, in the American continent, and in the Asian region, the ASEAN, the APEC, the NAFTA, European Union, and a number of such economic groupings in the African region also. I think immediately after South Africa became an independent country at the end of the apartheid session, it was felt that the South Africa and Australia and India should play a leading role in bringing together the countries of this region. In this context, Mauritius has played a very significant role in organizing conferences, in bringing together the countries and ensuring that an economic grouping emerges. So the rationale is based upon a number of factors which have brought these countries together. Of course, the other rationale which is at the back of this grouping is the complementarities that exist among these countries. Some are resource rich, some are not having the same resources which others have. For instance, South Africa is mineral rich. The Middle East, some of the countries, Oman and Madagascar that are included, the African continent and the Middle East portion, they are rich in the oil resources. India is rich in oil resources and technology. And some of the countries of the Asian region and Australia are rich in capital resources. Therefore, there is a certain resource complementarity that was conceived by the originators of this grouping.
Having understood the importance of Indian Ocean Rim and the potentialities that exist in regional cooperation, let us now see how and when did the idea of forming an economic grouping of Indian Ocean Rim countries originate, and further, how far the idea of grouping has traveled. In other words, at what stage is the grouping and how much work has been done?
This idea originated long time ago. In the 70s, these concepts were floating around, in the 80s too. But as I said, other factors like the old colonial pulls, the question of competitive blocks, the superpower rivalry in the Indian Ocean, and their attempts to put down the regional powers, all these had interfered, and it was not possible for the littoral states themselves to autonomously evolve something in the Indian Ocean Rim. But in the 1990s, it has become possible, and three key factors, I would say, are, firstly, the emergence of South Africa into the mainstream of international political and economic mainstream. And the second is India's own outward-looking orientation in its economy, its liberalization, and the fact that it is looking for new economic space. Thirdly, Australia, which was earlier anchored towards Europe and partly towards the Asia-Pacific in the Southeast Asia, East Asia, and America context, had started looking westward. They initiated what is called a look west policy based on their location on the Indian Ocean. So all these three countries were enabled to look to each other, and they may be seen as constituting the tripod of this Indian Ocean Rim association.
The coming in of NAFTA, comprising United States, Canada and Mexico, and the Asia-Pacific Economic Community, which is now in the making, besides a number of other groupings in East Africa, in Latin America, and in other parts of the world. So it was felt that the countries of the Indian Ocean Rim should also work together, try to forge a kind of partnership amongst themselves to foster closer economic links, trade and investment patterns which could boost the trade of this whole region. The SAARC countries only account for 1% of global trade. If we take into account the countries of the Indian Ocean Rim, including South Africa and Australia, the total share in the global trade is not in keeping with the resources or the population or the skills and genius of the people inhabiting this vast area, nor the techno-economic progress that has taken place in several countries of this region in last 2-3 decades.
The idea of forming the economic grouping was first noted when the South African Prime Minister was here in India, and that was of course the culmination of the various official level initiatives that were taken to see whether such grouping can be formed. And subsequently in March 1995,
Mauritius organized a meeting which was called a tripartite meeting, in which government officials, the academicians, the business community participated. That was the beginning. And subsequently, of course, Australia also took initiative to organize meetings of different representatives in their personal capacities. But the Mauritius initiative has been sponsored and supported by the governments of the respective countries. So I would put March 1995 as the beginning of this initiative. And subsequently, I should say the whole process has moved very fast. And so 2 or 3 meetings took place. It's only in March 1997 that the charter for the Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, in short called as I-Ark, was formed. Now, as part of this I-Ark, there are 3 wings in it. One is called as the I-O-R Business Forum, IORBF, in which the business community has evolved its own charter, its own work program, and its own organizational structure for ensuring that the business-to-business contacts and business-to-business transactions are encouraged and facilitated. The second wing of this IOR-ARC is called as IOR-AG, that is I-RAG in short, that is Indian Ocean Rims Academic Group. The basic work program of this IORAG is to conduct research. This group also has identified a number of subjects on which intensive research is to be undertaken. This group also has set up a chair in the Indian Ocean Studies, and already a person is appointed, and it will be housed in Mauritius under the auspices of the university there, and in the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade in India would be the coordinating agency, and a lot of further steps are being taken also to launch other studies identified under this grouping. The third governmental group has been very active in holding meetings, and the charter, which was finalized by the initiative of India, has been already accepted, and the grouping is now formally launched. It's almost a year ago. Last March, the first ministerial meeting was the starting point for formally launching the whole grouping. As part of the Indian Ocean Business Forum, I should say, FICCI, that is the Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry here, is the nodal agency. They have set up IOR Net to facilitate exchange of information, exchange of data, and also facilitating various meetings among the business community people. So in a way, I think the whole three-pronged approach that is adopted to pursue this Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation gives the hope that it is moving very fast, and then it is moving with clear perceptions about the goals and the visions, and the concrete implementation of the various programs would perhaps do take place in a short while.
Now, what kind of membership is envisaged for this grouping as of now is what we will find out.
Indeed, the question of membership has agitated the minds of the M7 and then M14 because this is a very difficult question. We have in this very optimum interpretation, if you take, we have something like 30 countries which would be technically washed by the Indian Ocean and therefore qualify as rim countries. That is the, I would say, the optimum interpretation. And then if you take a more liberal interpretation in terms of those countries which are connected through the adjacent waterways and who are otherwise in the Indian Ocean region rather than the rim, then we are talking about something like 52 countries. And there are, of course, those who even think that hinterland countries whose only access to the sea is into the Indian Ocean should also have some sense of participation in this grouping. So we are really looking at a very large potential constituency for the Indian Ocean Rim Association, but for the present we are beginning with what I would call a critical mass of 14 countries. These 14 countries, indeed in economic terms, constitute a critical mass because, for example, out of the $1 trillion trade that Indian Ocean Rim countries have, about 70% of that is accounted for by these 14 countries. So they are really the economic bulk of the larger Indian Ocean Rim grouping that we will of course eventually aspire to. But we have to be very careful about how we proceed towards universalization of this initiative, because if we become a new United Nations or a new G77, then we'll lose focus, we'll lose efficacy. So we have to go towards that goal progressively and based on consensus, and that's what we have decided. And there is a working group on membership. There are 7 countries who have applied to join, and there might be others who would be interested once they know what the criteria are. So for the present we are 14 and we may expand progressively.
So far as the countries, what should be the scope of this whole grouping, there has been a lot of debate from the beginning. The first initiative was taken by 7 countries. They came to be known as M7 because the Mauritius was involved in it. And these 7 countries included Australia, India, Kenya, Mauritius, Oman, Singapore and South Africa. Now after 2-3 meetings, these 7 countries decided to have 7 more countries. So with the result, today the Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, the I-Ark, is consisting of 14 countries. Of course, there is a lot of demand and interest in the other countries which can be legitimately called or considered as belonging to the Indian Ocean Rim. They are also interested in joining this grouping. Now the charter envisages that the countries which conform to certain principles and basic guidelines laid down in the charter are eligible. But the expansion of the grouping will take place in steps and stages. For instance, the charter stipulates that the countries should not interfere in each other's activities. The countries should have complementarities. They must accept sort of a most favored nation treatment to each other as a principle for trade flows. They must have a more liberalized and globalized framework. Some of these principles are laid down to facilitate faster pace of cooperation among these countries. The Indian Ocean Rim Association for Regional Cooperation, that is I-Ark, as of now consists of 14 countries: Australia, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Madagascar, Malaysia, Mauritius, Mozambique, Oman, Singapore, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Tanzania and Indian Republic. These 14 countries are having very interesting complementarities among themselves, and as such they will be making a very good grouping for economic, political and cultural cooperation. The 14 countries are selected, when we say, in an arbitrary manner, or they are all such which conform to the principles laid down in the charter in the first instance. But in due course of time, obviously, this grouping will include many more other countries which conform to the principles of the Charter, and as such, this has the potential of emerging as a very powerful economic grouping, regional grouping in the coming years.
In today's program, we have talked about the need for cooperation among the countries of the Indian Ocean Rim, the present position of the grouping, and the members comprising this grouping. In the next part of this program, we will identify the areas of mutual benefit, some political and psychological hurdles, and their consequences.